Hello there, Homeschool Nolan here to help you navigate learning in the digital age. Today I'd like to continue my discussion of Milton Friedman's book, Free to Choose. Now, Milton Friedman, again, was a Nobel Prize winning economist in the 20th century, best known for being a staunch advocate of free markets and limited government intervention. In 1980, he and his wife Rose published this book, Free to Choose, which was based on a popular documentary series they produced for PBS. Now, Free to Choose has 10 chapters, each covering an important topic in economics. The topics that this book covers are all still relevant today, but there's one chapter I feel is particularly relevant for today, and that is the chapter on created equal, where Friedman discusses the idea of equality. The topic of equality and its opposite, inequality, has gotten more attention this past decade as the gap between the very rich and the poor has only gotten wider and wider. And lately, we've seen discussions about equality evolve into discussions about equity as well. But what does equality really mean in an economic sense? And perhaps more importantly, what does created equal mean? To explore this question, Milton Friedman in his documentary visits Monticello, which of course was the home of Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States. Thomas Jefferson was also the author of the Declaration of Independence, and it was Jefferson who penned these immortal words. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." So what does it mean that all men are created equal? We all know that some people are born taller, smarter, stronger, or better looking. So then, does created equal then mean everyone just has equal opportunity? Probably not. For as Friedman points out, we all know that children born to rich parents will likely have more opportunities than a child born to a poor family. To Thomas Jefferson and the Founding Fathers, created equal meant that all men were equal before God. Friedman also writes, "Equality before God, personal equality, is important precisely because people are not identical." So, because we are all born with different gifts and different circumstances, we will all each live our own unique lives. But that does not mean that any of us is born with the inherent right to rule over another. Friedman also writes, "Jefferson had no doubt that some men were superior to others, that there was an elite, but that did not give them the right to rule others." Now, this was a very revolutionary idea in 1776. For almost all of human history, people have believed that kings, Caesars, pharaohs, and emperors were born with the divine right to rule over others. Slave masters also believed that they had the right to own other people. And this leads us to the topic of slavery. Milton Friedman does point out in his book that Thomas Jefferson was, among many other things, himself a slave owner. While Jefferson did seem to agonize over the issue of slavery during his lifetime, he never made any serious attempt to free his own slaves while he was still alive. This irony, or what some would say hypocrisy, then raises the question: how seriously should we take his words that all men are created equal, when the author of these words himself owned slaves? This is a topic people seem to be debating more and more these days. If this country's founders did not live up to the principle of equality which they founded the country upon, does that make the principle itself invalid and not worth fighting for? This is an important question, and it's a question I think every American should try to answer for themselves. For the way we view equality will very much shape our world and our attitude towards everyone else in society. But back to Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman recognized that we are all indeed born with unequal talent, luck, and opportunity. But he was against trying to bring about equal outcomes by government intervention. If anything, he believed that it would be even more unfair and more unequal if some people got to decide what was fair for everyone else. Friedman instead saw liberty as the best hope for lifting someone out of poverty, and he did not see a conflict at all between liberty and equality. At the end of his chapter on equality, he writes, "A society that puts equality ahead of freedom will end up with neither equality or freedom." He then continues, "A society that puts freedom first will, as a happy byproduct, end up with both greater freedom and greater equality." So, agree or disagree? Milton Friedman's words did seem to have an effect back in 1980. For the decades following his book saw the rise of government deregulation and the collapse of socialist and communist governments around the world. But times have changed. Inequality has risen tremendously in the past decade. Today, the top 5% in the US own about 2/3 of the country's wealth, compared to about 55% back in 1980. And as inequality has risen, so have calls for more government intervention to address it. So do Milton Friedman's arguments against excessive government intervention still make sense? Or should government do more today to address the growing inequality and the social instability that may come along with it? These are all important questions that our children will have to face as they grow up in this world. I put a link to the book in the notes below. Give it a read and have a discussion with your children or your students as to which of Friedman's ideas are still relevant or not as relevant today. At the very least, I believe his book will get you thinking about some important topics that are still just as relevant today as they were in 1980. And I hope this has been helpful to you as you prepare your students for an uncertain future. If so, please click subscribe below and leave a comment. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.